It's one thing. We talked about sacrifices, making a choice sacred. So the sacrifices we make the choices that we make sacred. But what keeps them sacred is boundaries. Most of us are pretty bad at boundary making, at boundary setting. And that's for lots of reasons. Number one, boundaries are taught, and not all of us are taught boundaries from an early, from early on, right? Number two, sometimes we have these myths around boundaries, like, oh, if you love someone you don't need boundaries, right? Boundaries are restrictive, and what they divide people, so we have like these negative ideas. But I think one of the biggest ones, and especially as women, is that we're taught to be polite, and we're taught to be peacemakers, and we think that boundary setting means making conflict. We think boundary setting means being aloof or uncaring, or causes conflict or hurting someone else's feelings, or whatever it is. We value politeness and pleasing over ourselves, because that's what boundaries are ultimately protecting, is what's most sacred. Because if you ever notice the sacrifices that we talked about, that we often realize that we've made, that weren't um weren't choices that benefited us, are the ones where we sacrificed ourselves, the ones where we gave away too much. So let's talk a little bit about what boundaries are, and maybe a little bit of what they are not. Boundaries provide structure. They provide structure to your physical space, your energetic space, your emotional space. um, they're like, I do like to think of them as mudras or bandhas. So we think of the mudras and bandhas in our body as like these sacred seals. They seal in energy, they protect, but they also, bandhas, bring us inward. They direct us inward. You can think of it kind of like, what is pratyahara? So if we think about pratyahara, pratyahara is that bridge between the outer world and the inner world. Pratyahara is kind of like, it's not something we do, it's something that happens when we limit the distractions. So when you limit the distractions that are happening, when you limit the ways that your mind is going out, it sort of brings you into that space where we can now bring our attention inward. And so I that's what one of the things I love about Ashtanga. If we take it at its very basic theoretical level, we say we pay attention to the breath, the bandhas or the body, right? And the drishti, the mind. So we just kind of narrow it down to those three things. And so all those other things that we add to it, like the conditions of a posture or whether or not, those are actually not really part of it. It's really quite simple. It's just those things. Pay attention to your breath, the shape of the body that it's making, and where the mind is. That's it. That's Ashtanga at its most basic level. That's the method. That is actually the method. So all the rest of it is just kind of the script. But by providing us just three simple things to pay attention to, I say simple things, but they're also the three most important things, right? So your breath is super important. Where your mind is really important. And what your body is doing, that shape that is good, because bandhas is a perfect shape, a perfect seal of your body. So to maintain that means you have to be true to your body. Those three things, when we talk about everything, that's really what matters in practice. That really is what matters. And that's all that matters. Pay attention to those three things, and that brings you into that sacred space. We keep those sacred. And so pratyahara. So I feel like that being the method, that kind of puts us in that space where, but of course, we still let ourselves get distracted by all the rest of the nonsense that gets put out there. But at its very basic level, it's providing us a structure so that we can come inward. Having limits and having boundaries is what keeps people safe. It's what makes them feel safe. Kids that don't have boundaries or don't have any limitations, they get anxious. So do puppies. I'm learning. And so do we, by the way. So if you ever notice, that's why when people are starting Ashtanga yoga, we often teach it in a very, very structured way, right? We really emphasize that structure. We say, inhale, reach your arms up. We leave very little room for um, there's freedom. Of course, you're honoring your body, but we don't like say, oh, whatever you want to do, inhale and, just do something with your arms. No, we tell them exactly where. We tell them what to breathe. Once the structure is down, and this is the same with boundaries. So when you first meet somebody, the boundaries tend to be a little bit more firm. Yeah. Like I mean, for example, why do you think they tell you when you go into a teacher's room for the very first time, practice primary? I practice primary because I'm safest as a student in primary series. I know it the best. And if you come over to me, I'm probably not going to need a whole, I don't, I'm going to be my safest with a teacher I don't know if I practice something I know well. Rather than come in with something where I'm very vulnerable and needing someone to step in, then it's a little bit, it puts me in a bit of an unsafe position. So boundaries keep us safe. And so, me as a student, by coming in, now that's not true with everybody, by the way, as Megan will tell you. For some people, it might be safer to practice intermediate, in which case I would say that's what you should do. Because I think the whole idea of this, like, first time you meet somebody, is to have some boundaries in place. It was like, I don't kiss on the first date or whatever it is. It's these things like kind of put these little lines there just so we can have a healthy connection. So it's not because back off, I don't know you. It's like, why wouldn't I want to set us up for success? Why would I want to come into someone, we'll keep it with the yoga thing. Why would I want to come into somebody's room and be practicing something that I'm really needing help with and putting them in a position where now they're going to have to step in, never having seen me practice, and me feeling vulnerable. So I'm like, this is a recipe for disaster. I'm actually setting the stage for something not good to happen. Right? I mean, there's so many ways this can go wrong. Do I really want to start off my relationship this way? I don't. I'd rather start it off in a nice way. Hey, let's start somewhere neutral. Let's start somewhere safe. Let's build from there. That's what boundaries do. And so they shift. They do shift, right? So that as you get to know somebody, you probably can think about that, whether you've raised children or whether maybe you've gotten to know bosses or coworkers better. Things start to shift in the beginning. Maybe you went to work and we kept things very business. I didn't tell you a lot about my home life, or you don't know a lot about me, and that's okay because we're coworkers and that's where we stay. But then that relationship blossomed into a friendship. And so you started to begin to share maybe a little bit more about your personal life, and maybe it grew from there. So boundaries are not meant to be set in stone, but they are meant to protect what's important. And what's important are relationships and your relationship to yourself, your relationship to each other, but also your relationship to other people. So it's not a dividing line. It's a way that I can make sure we connect in healthy ways. There are signs that boundaries are needed. Saying yes when you want to say no, a boundary is needed. Saying no, but feeling guilty for saying no, boundary is needed. If you feel like you have very little privacy or alone time, doing whatever you can to avoid conflict or problems. So you know that when you do that, you're sacrificing your own beliefs, you're sacrificing whatever is important to you for the sake of peace. Saying you're sorry when you haven't done anything wrong. When someone hurts you or cheats you, not saying anything. Again, it's that not disturbing the peace sort of thing. Constantly adapting to be everything to everyone, feeling the need for everyone to like you, and feeling resentful when other people don't take your needs into consideration. It's the clearly communicating. It's my husband leaving his clothes on the chair thinking it's a hamper and me picking them up time and time again until the point where I go fucking batshit crazy, right? Resenting that I'm doing everything and no one's helping me with anything, but also I haven't said anything, nor have I asked for anything. So I get myself to the place where I'm pulling my hair out but because I've let a lot of little things go by and not um, clearly communicated. Now, may sound like I'm not a victim in this. And in fact, if I would say to him, hey, I have a lot going on right here, and I need you to, pick up your laundry. Could you do that? I'm sure he would. But I don't know. How many of you hope that someone else will just do it by osmosis? We just want someone to see us and do what they need to do by osmosis. And that's boundaries are taught. They are not innate. And if dishes magically get washed or laundry magically gets done, or, and this is why I think women, especially, I'm going to just say it, we're really good at holding things together. We do a lot of things for a lot of people, and we hold a lot of things together at work, at home, in whatever capacity. In friendships, we are the connectors in many, many ways. And unfortunately, that also means that we are kind of like the unsung heroes too, in a way. So if we don't say anything, we are those people that make it look easy, right? We know it's not easy. We know how much energy goes into it. We know how much sacrifice goes into it. We understand how tired we are, but at the same time, we make it look easy. And so therefore, we enable ourselves to kind of be sacrificed with everything else. And so it's going back and understanding how to set those boundaries. So first, let's look at the areas of boundary. So here's we're going to call them circles, because I think of circles, mudras, right? These are empowering. If we can look at these domains that we want to protect in our lives. So first and foremost is our physical boundary, and that is your body, your personal space. It's your time and your privacy in yoga. And let's just stick right here with yoga right now. Like, I'll leave all the husband stories out and the puppy stories, but just in yoga, those physical boundaries are really important. And those have been breached many a time in an Ashtanga room. So people that infringe on your time, um, people that get really close. Have you ever had somebody like actually get very close to you and take up it's a very threatening posture when somebody gets very close to you. And I've had that happen, especially if they're much bigger than you are. It's like they're taking your physical space. That's definitely an invasion. Also, invading your privacy, not letting you have just your own time, your own moment, having a moment. But with touch is also commenting on someone's appearance. That is also a breach of physical boundary. When someone, and that's why as yoga teachers and as yoga, we want to be very careful the way we comment on people's bodies. So many people come into yoga thinking their bodies need to be fixed or there's something wrong with them, not just mentally, but definitely physically. And especially that perception that we're being judged in some way by a teacher, really, really important that we're respecting that physical boundary in the way we comment. Saying this might be more comfortable if you bend your knee, not, but saying, boy, that looks like it's a wreck waiting to happen, or whatever. That would be a breach of a physical boundary. or or stepping in so quickly that nobody has a chance to communicate the boundary that's being breached. And that happens a lot because we're in a position, our head is turned away and we don't know who's coming around. So physical boundaries. Now, it is our job still, by the way. We are responsible unless, and I'm talking about in ways where you actually are not victimized, right? So we're not talking about when you're actually a victim of somebody breaching your physical boundary. That is different. But even in a yoga room, we are responsible for those as students. We are responsible for saying no. Why do we not say no when something doesn't feel right? Why do we not say anything? Say,
Your feelings.
don't hurt the feelings. So we'll sacrifice ourselves. Here, take my body and do what you want with it. Because we don't want to hurt their feelings when they could give a rat's ass about yours. It's a power thing. Look what I can do, and you won't stop me. So this is really important because we need to have the voice to say no, because the sacred thing that we don't want to sacrifice our bodies for someone else's approval. For so that or just not even for their approval, just so that we don't hurt their feelings, just so that we don't get their disapproval. Your body is not something you sacrifice. And I didn't even go into time, but time is in there, and it doesn't in the yoga room. I mean, you are giving your time, but there are people that will ask that time is one that often gets breached. Someone taking up the time, your time, and that is a physical boundary. Time is limited. You don't have endless, and not everyone is entitled. All right, the next one is emotional boundaries. It's getting your emotional needs met. For example, watching your mother berate your father in front of you. Your emotional boundary at that point is being breached. As a teacher, there's a to bemoan the the downside of teaching, right? Or to like if you talked about, oh, I'm not getting paid enough or whatever, and you're talking to your students, that is an emotional boundary that you're crossing. And that people do cross a lot, actually, or prying or prodding into people's lives that they're not ready to share, using manipulation. Those are crossing emotional boundaries. And when it happens, you often feel it's different than the physical boundary. I think you feel there's a little bit of shame sometimes, I think, associated with it. And there's just a real ick. Like you just know there's something wrong, but it's not as easy to put your finger on it as the physical boundaries being breached. Like you feel the whole sense of ick and awful, and you want to get out of there, but it's not as clear as when a physical boundary is. And so emotional boundaries are quite tricky because I think they often, it's usually manipulate, it's some form of manipulation, and it's usually one that benefits the person who's breaching the boundary. They'll guilt you into it, right? Or use you in a role that isn't the role that's appropriate for you. So there's physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, then energetic boundaries. Your energetic boundary is the one of your vitality, right? It's picking up the energy of those around you. It's feeling overwhelmed by relationships and dramas. And all of these, by the way, are our responsibility to keep safe, right? I want to be really clear about that. Again, these are our responsibilities. I would say this is the one that I can fall prey to, and I think most of us probably can. The feeling like you've given everything away at the end of the day. And if you ever feel like that, like you're just so overwhelmed that you've just given it all away, and you have nothing left. Your gas tank is empty, your bucket is empty, whatever you want to say. And this is where the energetic boundary, because every interaction with someone is an energetic interaction. So whether you're listening or whether you're being, and so if we don't have those spaces in between, that privacy, or if we have somebody who is taking, too much of that energy, right? If you have just, and we're talking about uninvited, right? Uninvited. And I can give a really good example that is not anyone's fault. We all know that when Indy died, I was really not in a place where I could hold a lot. And I had to express that to people in my family, my mom and dad and everybody. I just had to say, I'm, I'm really just energetically, I don't have a lot there. And I really kind of need some help. Not that I need you to give me anything, but I just can't really give a lot away right now. That's all. I just can't hold a lot at the moment. That's all. And I had to communicate that. In communicating that, that was wonderful. Nobody got angry with me. Nobody said, "You selfish bitch." Yeah. Everybody just said, "I appreciate you," knowing that so that I don't I don't tax you too much. And nobody felt bad or guilt. I felt weird articulating that. I think it was really hard for me to articulate that. I think I may have even rehearsed it with Megan, which is something I'll do often, is rehearse the words for that, how to say that, because even if it's rehearsing and processing, um, because it's not something I'm naturally apt to do. I'm used to kind of holding a lot. And I was already holding a lot and just couldn't hold a lot more. But by communicating that, what I was doing was I was setting a boundary, just saying my cup is full right now. I don't have a lot of bandwidth for a lot more. And people really respected that. And people that love you will. Um, People that don't know you as well, they're not going to be quite, but that's okay. You shouldn't have a hard time doing it. But that energetic thing is really, really important. And I think that sometimes that's why mornings are so important, because if you do something for you in the morning, whether it's your journaling, whether it's your practice, whether it's sitting in contemplation or sitting with knitting or whatever it is that you do for you, I think it's really important that you start your day with that, because then you start in the plus sign. If you hit the ground running as soon as then all those energetic interactions, the most of them take. And if you have nothing that you've kind of built up, if you don't have a surplus that you're starting with or something in your bucket that you're starting with, it's really easy to have that drained. Um, and especially like if you're not sleeping well, those sorts of things. It's really important, I think, that we start our day. And so we talk about boundaries. So creating a sacred space, that sacred time that is for you. It's keeping that sacred. What you're doing is you're protecting your energy. You're protecting your bandwidth. You're protecting, and I'll get to how this relates to other people, because the truth is, why do you put the mask on yourself first? If you're on an airplane and it's going down, they always say, you first, then the kid, because you have to take care of you first. You won't be any good for anyone else. I was 26 years old, a new counselor in a really problematic school. Lots of kids came from really difficult homes. And I worked a lot with social services, and my kids were little too at the time. And I remember I had a senior counselor, and I was really lucky because she was like a real wonderful mentor to me. But I took those kids home, let me tell you. And when I say I took them home, I literally took them home. Megan, I literally took them home. Um, some of them didn't have meals. They didn't have clothes. I was known to take them to McDonald's and get them dinner. I was known to drive them places with my kids. I was known to help them with homework while I was helping my own kids with homework. And you can imagine what that was doing to me and to everybody, right? You think my kids like sharing their mom with, these other little kids. They didn't, but they were very good. But I remember saying to Debbie Tinsdale was her name, and I said, I don't know how you do it. And she said, You're n do you love your job? And I said, yes. And she said, do you want to be there for these kids? And I said, yes, I'm trying. She said, well, you're not gonna last this way. You're gonna burn out and you're not gonna be there for them. And so if you want to be there for them, then you're going to have to start putting in those boundaries. That's not a lack of love. That's out of love. Because if I didn't, I would be sacrificing them, because our energy is finite and mine was. And that was a one-way ticket to being burnt out, is to never leave your job, is to work at your job 24 hours a day, is to give up your family for your job, and that happens to, especially that happens to those of us that love our jobs, that love what we do. If we never turn off of what we do, then what we're doing is we're sacrificing every other area in our life. We're allowing that to eat. And then eventually it does catch up. We will resent the very thing that we love, and we will leave the very thing that we love. So when we put boundaries in, by me saying, I can't take them home, I have to leave my work, and I will be there fresh in the morning, would allow me to be there for them and continue to be there for them. So it protected them. Boundaries don't just protect you, they protect the people that you love, and they protect the relationships that are important. So by not sacrificing everything in my life for this purpose, or whatever it was, for these kids, and I was actually keeping myself in a good place. It was a really tough lesson to learn. I never forget her telling me that, and I've always remembered it, as I've gone along, and it's helped. You're doing it for them. You're not being selfish, but our energy is finite. The next one is mental boundaries. This, I think, is getting tested all over the place these days. So your mental boundaries is your thoughts, your values, your opinions. They mean something and need to be respected. So when somebody tells you you don't know what you're talking about, when somebody criticizes you or um, berates you for having an opinion or whatever your values are, that is a boundary crossed, and that should not be tolerated. And it happens all the time, right? We don't just disagree, we make you wrong. Like it's not that you have a different opinion, it's that you're wrong. And that comes at it. What's really interesting to me is those mental boundaries get crossed. They're so easily crossed in in situations that are super meaningful. I often look at the way new parents are, and how vulnerable they are to everybody's outside criticism, how everybody has an opinion of how you should parent. Um, and it's so annoying. Like it's just like every child is different. I mean, I thought I had it all down when I had Megan. I was like, oh, I'm a great parent. I know exactly how to do this. This is awesome. And then I had Billy, and he was exactly the opposite. And I couldn't do anything that I did with her, and nothing worked. And so people think they know everything, but nobody leaves space. No, so respect is just leaving space for lots of different opinions. That's all. You can silently disagree. People can silently disagree with me, but it's leaving space and knowing that there's a lot we don't know. So that mental boundary gets crossed a lot because everybody wants to be right, and everybody seems to think they have the right to voice their opinion and force it upon you. And so there needs to be like kind of a little script around that and say, I hear you. I usually say, that's great that that works for you. Or I'm glad that works for you. Yeah, I mean, there's these interesting things, but scripts are really important. But when those aren't respected, just understand that when somebody disrespects your opinion, when somebody says your opinion is invalid or criticizes your belief system or whatever it is, they are they are crossing a boundary. So that is a boundary crossing. And then last but not least is the material boundaries. And of course, I'm going to put right up there with material is creative material. When that gets when that gets taken, that is a boundary crossed. But yeah, money, property that belongs to you, things that are taken, and things are taken, by the way. I mean, just like taking something without asking permission, right? Just assuming you can. Um, but also using someone's words or ideas. Those are also material boundaries that get crossed. And so it's our job, of course, then to keep these things sacred, because if you notice all of these from physical, emotional, mental, energetic, material, these are things that belong to us. These are us. And so what we are protecting with boundaries is we're protecting that inner sanctum. We're protecting what's really sacred and precious to us. And what I want you to do this week, because I think it's important, and we can even begin to do this now, but I think maybe it would be good for a journal assignment. Take one of these and reflect on your past interactions that have made you uncomfortable. So within one of those categories, think about something recently that has made you uncomfortable that would have breached one of these boundaries. Because I think one of the things that makes helpful is going, okay, call it when you see it, right? Like this crossed a boundary. And sometimes I think that's for me, some of my learning has been a little backwards. It's having a boundary crossed and realizing I had a whole bunch of them that were, and it didn't occur to me that it had happened until the big one happened, until the bottom line, got crossed. And then you're like, holy shit. And then I go back and I go, oh yeah, so I let a lot of other things kind of slip by because they weren't as obvious, or I was willing to deal with it. And it wasn't until it hit my bottom line that I realized that boundaries had been crossed. Get comfortable with short-term discomfort. That's what stops us from making the little boundary setting, is we don't want the short-term blips, that might be a little awkward. I don't know how to say that, those sort of things. I'm gonna avoid this little awkward situation. And by doing that, I leads to much bigger situations. So get comfortable. You have to be willing to be comfortable with some short-term discomfort. The third thing is write a script. I mean this 100%. Do you remember when Nancy Reagan? No, you guys won't. Most of you are never going to remember this, even if you did live in the US, because you're not old enough. But Nancy Reagan used to have this thing with drugs. Jolie, you'll remember this with me. Just say no. Do you remember that? There's a slogan with drugs: just say no. It failed so badly in so many different ways and for so many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is, really, you're going to tell your teenager, just say no? How does that work for everybody? Just say no. You tell your teenager, you're going out and they're like, hey, you want to smoke? No. Yeah, that doesn't work. So you give them, Megan will tell you, I used to tell my kids to say, tell them my mom is batshit crazy and she drug tests me. You have they need a script. They need a plausible something when they get like put on the spot. You need to put on this, you're put on the spot and somebody says, dude, you want whatever, you want and no, my mom is batshit crazy. She drug tests me. Totally plausible. They would go, yeah, never mind. Get it. Totally get it. It no doesn't work. So we need scripts. And that was a funny script, but it actually is a real script. But you need how to say whatever it is you're going to say, and you need practice communicating what you won't do, because we don't have practice doing that. And I hope you have somebody that you can practice that with, because I think it's important. But if you're comfortable talking to yourself, you can do it in the mirror. But I think it's really important that you don't want to have to think of the words on the spot. Don't you remember, if somebody asks you something, right? Instead of saying, how many of you have ever had this? How many of you already have this script? Somebody asks you to do something and you go, let me think about it. Give me a let me go back and check. I know, just one we use. Let me look at my schedule, right? Come on. We're just saying because we need to buy some time, because we need to figure out whether we really want to say yes or no to this. Wonderful. That is your script. That is what helps you put boundaries. Let me go back and look at my calendar. Whatever it is, find a script. So when you go back and you're thinking those interactions, how are you going to put these things into words? How are you going to communicate what it is that's important to you so that you can keep that safe and keep that sacred? Start small. Start with the baby steps. Start with the beginner boundaries. Sometimes I tell people, that's why I say start with your morning routine. If you're not really good at carving space for yourself, start in the morning before anyone's up. You know, that's your time. Carve that out and take care of that part. That's a beginner boundary, that morning time. It doesn't have to be 90 minutes, it can be 20 minutes. Give yourself 20 minutes in the morning. And then know what your bottom line boundary is. Know what that bottom line boundary is. And if someone has crossed it, then I don't care what it takes. I don't care how you say it. And I don't care who you disappoint. You do it. Don't let anybody cross the bottom line boundary. Don't let anybody. Nobody has that right. Nobody gets to. You're worth more.